Hi everyone, today we're going to be looking at variables and expressions. There's a lot of keywords, so let's get started. Let's say I have this. So there's two x and y's. What do they mean? So let's say I wanted to count how many shoes are in a room. And I knew that if I had one person, then I would have two shoes. But if I had, let's say, three people, then I would have 6 shoes. So if I had, I don't know how many people, then I would have, I don't know how many shoes, depending on how many people I have. These are people. So depending, if a number keeps changing, we can represent it with a letter. So if the number keeps changing, we call it variable. It varies. Okay? And it is an unknown amount. We don't know what the number is. And it's represented a pronumeral. So the word pronumeral just means a letter instead of a number. So this is a number, 2. This is a pronumeral, a letter or a number. So numbers represent amounts, and pronumerals are used to represent variables, amounts that change. So sometimes we use x, y, m, c, a. So for example, y equals mx plus c. These are all pronumerals and they are variables. And we have theta and beta and other Greek letters, especially when we use it for angles. Okay, let's look at the first word, term. A term, in easiest way to remember, is a chunk. Every chunk is a term. The proper way to say it is an item. There could be numbers, variable, or a mix. So if I look at this, there's one chunk there, that's a term, and another chunk there. So we have two terms here. The word coefficient means a number in front of a variable, and the number will multiply the variable. So in this case, we have 2. 2 is a coefficient. Now the coefficient can have a negative number too. Let's look at an example. So here we have, how many coefficients do we have? So we have the coefficient of c, which is minus 2. We have the coefficient of ab squared, which is 2. And we have the coefficient of a, which is 0.2. This is, minus 11 is not a coefficient because it's not in front of a variable. The coefficient for d squared is invisible because there's 1 d squared. So the coefficient of d squared is 1. And the coefficient of AB is also 1, and the coefficient of Y is also 1. Term. So how many chunks are here? Let's count them. This is a term, 1. This is a term, 2. This is a term, 3. This is a term, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So these are all terms. So term are the chunks, and coefficient is a number in front of a variable. Constant. Constants are the terms with no variable. So we have one constant over here, which is negative 11. So a number that doesn't change, whereas coefficient multiplies with the variable and changes. So constant, a number that doesn't change and stays constant. So let's recall these 4 words and let's try and look at this equation. So how many constants are there? Here we have negative 1 is a constant. And how many terms do we have? Well, we have 2x is a term, minus xy is a term, 3x squared, and minus 1. So we have 4 terms altogether. What are the coefficients? Well, number 2 is the coefficient of x, negative 1 is the coefficient of negative xy, and 3 is the coefficient of x squared. Remember, negative 1 is not a coefficient because it's not in front of any variables. And then, which of these are variables? Let's use green for variable. So variable is x squared, or x and y here, and x there. It's a bit messy, but hopefully you get the gist. And then, what is the difference between expression and equation? This is an expression. This is an equation. So can you guess what the difference is? An equation has the word equal inside it, and it has to have an equal sign. An expression is when it doesn't have an equal sign. And I remember because expression has an X, no equal sign. What about this? Is this an expression or an equation? Well, it has an equal sign, so it is an equation. What about Pythagoras' theorem? A squared equals b squared plus c squared. It has an equal sign, so it is an equation. What about this one? A perfect square. A squared minus 2ab plus b squared. Well, it has no equal sign, so it's an expression. So let's recap all the words together. Well, this one is an equation. Equation, because it has the equal sign, whereas that one there is an expression because it has no equal sign. Let's do constant next. Where are the constants? So that's a constant, a number by itself. That's another constant, a number by itself that doesn't change, and another constant, a number by itself that doesn't change. Let's underline the variables. I'm going to underline the variables in green. So this is a variable, a squared, ab's are variables, b squareds, variables, a's are variables. So variables are pronumerals or letters, things that change. Let's do coefficient. Coefficient always goes with a variable. So minus 2 is a coefficient of AB, 1 is the invisible coefficient of b squared, and 1 is the invisible coefficient of a squared. And lastly, let's do term. How many terms are there? It's going to get really messy, so you might want to copy the notes first before I circle all the terms. Maybe I'll make the term in squares. So here we have 1 term, 2 terms, 3, 4 terms over here, and on this side we have 1, 2, 3 terms. I hope all the colors and whatnot have not confused you and made it a little bit clearer. If anything, watch it again and see if you can predict which of them are terms, coefficient, constant, variable, equation, and expressions. Bye! So we've covered quite a few of these words. Expressions, things without an equal sign. Equations, expressions with equal signs. Then we did pronumerals, which just means letters that we use in mathematics, whether it's to represent an angle, whether it's in English, A, B, X, Y, or in Greek, so Greek letters like alpha, beta, or gamma. And variables, where we use pronumerals to represent something that can be a different number, like it varies, like 2x, and an x could be any number. So those are variables. So variables are represented by pronumerals. Then we did terms, which are chunks of things, coefficients, the numbers in front of a variable, and constant, numbers by itself. They could be negative, they could be fractions, but they don't have a pronumeral next to them because they're constant, they don't change. So what are the conventions when we write things? We multiply without using the x symbol. What does that mean? So instead of writing 2 times x, what we did before was to write 2x. Instead of writing 3 times a times b, we would write 3ab. This is not incorrect, but this is the convention we use. So we don't write the times symbol. Dividing, sometimes we represent it with a fraction. So instead of saying 2 divided by x, we would much rather write it as 2 over x. Instead of saying, let's say, x squared divided by 3a, we would write it as x squared over 3a. So we like using fractions more often. Numbers before variables. So we don't write x4. We don't write that. We write 4x. So before we wrote 2x, and we do not write x2. And the last convention is variables in alphabetical order. So whenever you see xy, you would not see yx. You will see ab squared, for instance, but you would not see b squared a. So we always put them in alphabetical order as well. That's it. I hope you understood and have a go at the practice questions. Bye.